So hello, welcome to the second panel for the Ogilvy PwC studio here at Cannes. Today we'll be talking about esports on a panel called Virtual Victory, and I'm joined by two eminent folks in the esports world. First of all, I'll introduce the man immediately to my left, who is Chris Lederer from PwC. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hey Jeremy, thanks for having me. I'm Chris Lederer. I'm a partner in our New York office at PwC. I work in our strategy practice. I work across the media space, actually, everything from advertising to publishing, and have been leading our efforts in and around esports.
Great, thanks. And also we have Chester King. Chester, tell us a little bit about why you're here and what your role is in this world.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so I'm Chester King. I'm the Chief Exec of the International E-Games Group, which was founded 3 months ago with support of the British government, and we're creating a new esports competition which is medal-based.
Wonderful. So why don't I kick off with you for a question, because I think there's been some controversy as to whether or not esports is, in point of fact, a sport. Certainly it's had some sports recognition recently in the United Kingdom, also in Russia and Italy, but I also heard that somebody streaked across the field, which to me strikes me as the mark of a sport.
Yeah, so I think just to clarify, what does a sport mean? So I think there's a definition of being recognized and being classified and being acknowledged. So most reason why esports wants to be recognized as a sport is for mainly two reasons. One is for the athletes to get visas. So in traditional sports, if you're traveling around the world, you have a specific visa. So that's very important for the athletes in esports. The other one is funding. So in the UK, we have this unusual situation. So esports falls under the Minister of Culture, not under the Minister of Sport, because if you're under Minister of Sport, you get specific funding, which is lottery or charity money. So in England, chess is a sport and bridge isn't a sport. So at the moment, we're very happy that esports isn't classified fully as a sport because we're still getting recognition and classified as a sport. And then Russia and Italy have just changed, and I think it's 21 countries around the world, mainly in Asia, either the National Olympic Committee or the National Sporting Association classify esports. So 21 countries so far have classified esports as a sport, but it's very different in each country.
So it's definitely growing, which brings us to the question of what does the audience for this incredibly fast-growing world look like? I read in a recent report that you did that there are some surprising demographics. Would you want to let us know a little bit about who these people are?
Sure. Maybe even a little bit more broadly. So we do a set of research regularly called the Consumer Insight Series, and we did a set of research this spring on the esports business. We spoke to 750 consumers around the US specifically, and we found a couple of very, I think, interesting things. So number one was just around awareness in general. So the good news is that awareness of esports in the US is really growing quickly. The caveat to that is that awareness is still relatively low, so it's about 15% of folks in the US could define what esports is. When we define it for them, it goes up to about 30 or 35%. The second thing that we found, which was, I think, insightful, was that it's really not just about playing, it's about playing and viewing. So a lot of the participation that we see in the States is around watching games, and that runs up to 20 hours a week, about the same amount that folks are spending actually playing the games. The third, and to your point, Jeremy, maybe one of the more surprising insights coming out of this was really kind of who's participating in esports. So we asked a pretty broad question about who's playing, who's watching, who's talking about it, and what we heard back was that it was very balanced between male and female, which was, I think, very counter to the idea that this is all about teenage boys in the basement.
Right. But for the sport to really grow, it's going to need to, or grow globally, I should say, it's going to need to have some sort of organizing body or committee or something. So you've begun to create some sort of officiating body.
Yeah.
Why is that necessary? What is the nature of what it is that needs officiating, and how is it going to go forward? That was a three-part question, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So basically, if you take esports to be like athletics, so within esports you have different disciplines which are the different gaming titles. So you have Call of Duty, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, the different games. But at the moment, no one has been overarching, having governing body for eSports athletics, because each publisher is in charge of its own title and its own destiny, and they've done a brilliant job up to this point. But the problem about that is that each event is just one event, so you need to have this collaborative approach. So up to now, some governments have stayed away. There's kind of the smoke screen of what is eSports. There's a kind of lack of knowledge on that. So what we've done is we went to the British government and we went to the IOC and we said, look, we've got this concept of creating competition which is medal only, national pride, new national heroes, inspire generation, and there's some fantastic fans out there, but at the moment, up to now, it's all been about prize money, which has been good on one level, but every sport, if you take football, see, we've got the Euros going on now, it's not about money, it's about national pride. If you've got golf, you've got the Ryder Cup. If you've got tennis, you've got the Davis Cup. So no one had thought about doing the Olympic concept of eSports, which is obviously like an athletics idea. So we went to the British government and we said, look, we want to do this, set it up as a not-for-profit. So the International E-Games Committee was founded 3 months ago. And then we're working for a company that's set up to help monetize that and manage that around the world. And what's been interesting for us from a brand point of view is some brands have stayed away from eSports and some parents are away from eSports because it's all been about money. Is it poker? Is it gambling? What's going on? But the purity of eSports and the positive psychology it has is fantastic, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I think. So there's some brands that have never got into eSports because they haven't liked the idea of, we give you prize money and that prize money goes to an individual and they might blow it on a fast car or something like that. So we're kind of creating this medal-only basis as a concept, which, as I say, is supported by the British government. So we're going to Rio during the Olympic Games. We're not part of the Olympic Games, but we're doing a 2-day pop-up in British House on August the 15th and 16th.
Are there competing international governing bodies that are starting to crop up, or in the United States?
So yeah, so there's an organisation called the International Esports Federation, which have 48 member associations. They're a slightly different model. They're kind of like a FIFA model, so they have a federation and associations. They're more recognised more in Asia. It came out of South Korea. So I think what will happen is there'll be some countries that will just go into this and some that will be independent. So we're setting up again with the British government the British Esports Association as a national governing body, and I think some countries will decide whether or not they're part of this federation or not. There's still more. It's such a young industry that it needs to develop, but I think there is an element of the governments being involved, to set up rules about governance. And if you take football, soccer, for example, every club has a contract with a player, and you have to see that contract through. At the moment in the esports, there are a lot of players that can change their contracts, rip up their contracts, which isn't really fair. So it's an ugly word, but regulation needs to come into force. But the publishers are regulating at the moment, and they're doing a brilliant job. But I think for it to grow and to give confidence to brands and sponsors to get involved, I think there needs to be more regulation.
And speaking to the question of brands, if you go and pay attention to an esports competition, you'll see a lot of brands from the electronics industry, a lot of brands from the gaming industry, but you won't see, for example, a ton of consumer brands in the United States, or for that matter, in the rest of the world. So brands really aren't here. What is what Chester says needed? Do we need regulation? Do we need the publishers to step out of it as far as the officiating bodies? What's going to help brands and sponsors become a part of this?
Yeah, I think in the U.S., I'm not sure that we would say that it starts with regulation. I think it starts with, is there an audience, for this activity right now? I think that what we're seeing in the U.S. is that there's signs that esports is starting to look and feel like an entertainment business. What we're seeing in terms of sponsorship, it is super limited. There's some of the usual suspects like Red Bull playing along. We've got Buffalo Wild Wings is another one that's now popped up on the radar screen. And recently, I think a good sign is that some of the large telecom companies are getting in, Verizon and AT&T sponsoring specific teams. Most of the activity right now is around sponsoring individuals, teams, in particular events. I think that the hope is that the sponsorship starts to drive enough exposure, excitement, and activity that some of those other forms of marketing and advertising will follow on. Up to now, we really haven't seen it that much. as it relates to the sponsorships that are happening, they're a little bit different than some of the more typical kinds of event sponsorships that we've seen in other media, and that is that they're much more short term because of the digital nature of these events. There are a lot of different kinds of asks around data, around social. So I think that there's a very interesting place to go as it relates to brands collaborating with some of the esports ecosystem in terms of developing closer relationships with a very interesting, I think, attractive demographic. So super important that the marketers start to get there, but it's, again, very, very early days.
Please.
Yeah, so I've got two comments. So in Poland, there was an event 4 months ago called the Intel Extreme Masters. 120,000 people watched it live. It was a 3-day event. 25 million people watched it online. So the numbers are, Europe, I think, slightly different to America. So, and what's interesting, so we've been approached, I think 2017 will be a massive year on brands getting involved in esports, because I think the Olympics for certain of the blue chip brands is consuming the world. But I think that what they've realised is the demographic, especially in Europe, of higher profile men who aren't watching TV. How do you get to these people? So, I know for certain there's a bank in the UK that's traditionally supporting another sport, and that sport, they're not hitting the right people because there's not getting enough impact on television. So they are definitely going to get more involved, and that's going to be when that announcement happens. That's going to be a big announcement.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I was going to say, yes, I would just one other thing there. I think that that question of viewership is an interesting one right now. So as it relates to some of the press that's been in the US, even in the past quarter, around audience size for some of the big events, right? So one of the headlines was that one of the large events in Asia has an audience larger than the NBA Finals, right? So there's a couple of factoids floating around there. So I think that the U.S. perspective, the pessimist perspective on that is you need to parse through an internet view versus a Nielsen, versus a Nielsen view.
Sure.
Also, a lot of it is from a U.S. perspective, it's international, which is great. But I think when you step that down, the audience sizes they're significant. That needs to be known. But I think that there's a little bit of caution around some of those numbers that are being thrown around.
I think the profile as well, because we were talking earlier about, so in Europe, in France, it has the highest ratio of console players to PC players. So the different console being PlayStation or Microsoft as opposed to a computer. So my understanding from Newzoo, who are very good on data, 71% of French gamers are on console, which is the highest percentage ratio, and I think the UK is second. So again, if you look at people buying consoles, it's more of an affluent group. So my view about brands getting involved is an FMCG play here. So obviously you got the Cokes and the Pepsis and stuff, but also sophistication like mobile phones or providers, but also things like watches. This isn't a luxury play, but it's kind of more of a mainstream of as I say, children. I call them children, but 16 to 24, 16 to 30, who new watches, or also the movie industry. If you go on Twitch, which I know we're talking about, what are the adverts before the videos? That's what I always look at, and most of the time they're promoting the latest blockbuster. That's which is the audience that's very hard to get to.
Yeah. So Chris brought up the question of the audience split being nearly half female, half male in the United States. Do you find that is true in the rest of the world as well?
No, I think Europe is definitely more in favour of men. I mean, the brilliant thing about esports, again, it is gender neutral, and there's what we're trying to achieve in our world is trying to get more females to play. We'd love to have balanced teams, balanced pro gamers, and I think the only thing that has marred a lot of women going into esports in the UK is there's a bit of toxicity, and I think that's something that we as industry, again, that's your question about why should governments get involved. There's certain platforms that could be done. So there's a thing called the Royal Foundation, which Prince William and Prince Harry are involved with, and they have a kind of project each year, and this year is to get rid of cyberbullying on social media. and they hadn't had, eSports wasn't on that agenda, and we made a big play to say, look, surely eSports has to be on there, because when you're gaming, you can do messaging on Twitch. So I think if you can get rid of these barriers of sexism, which there is a tiny bit of toxicity, I think it'd be fantastic, because you could ultimately have a team that is balanced, or more women or more men, and that's what would be fantastic. Again, from a sponsor point of view, you've got a team that's open for all.
So one of the main issues that was just brought up by you, Chris, was the question of measurement. And measurement seems to be a bigger issue in this space than it is in perhaps some more traditional media spaces. Is that going to need to get solved before brands are really participating in a big way? Or at least the big consumer brands?
Well, yeah, I mean, the answer immediately is yes. I mean, we've got much broader measurement issues in and around, the ecosystem than esports specifically.
Right.
So yes, it needs to get solved. Again, I think that early days, this kind of test and learn environment that the marketers are in, I think it's less. It's not an expectation going in from the marketer side that this is a fully baked environment where they're going to be able to track their return on investment. I think that there is some expectation that, just given the nature of this sport, that there's going to be more data, more ability to take a look at a program and the return that they're getting. So absolutely, the measurement across platform for esports will be important. But again, I think, back to Chester's point and kind of where this is in its evolution, I don't think that marketers, I think the challenges are around education and participation to find ways to have those kinds of things happen in a very, very immature media market right now.
I think on the data side, it's working with publishers. So, for example, the stuff that we're doing, the publishers know everything. Because obviously, when you log on, the games you're playing, who you are, everything. There is a slight anomaly where people lie about their age to play certain games. So, average age is probably slightly higher than what they actually are. But I think, again, if the publishers realize by working with agencies, for their benefit, they could release more data, because it's quite interesting. So for Rio, we're doing an invitation for the best gamers in each country, because certain countries don't have an association or a national governing body, but we want to have people from around the world. So the publishers go, well, we know the best gamers in each country. They've got all that data. So, and I think certain times with trying to get data, certain publishers are quite restrictive, and quite right too.
Yeah.
But I think as that broadens out, the numbers are astounding, and if you can get one or two publishers to work with different agencies, that would be great. I think that's an if. I think that that's just a mindset change, as we see in lots of these different businesses, on who owns the data and who owns the end customer. On the publisher side, there was some conversation even in the last month or two, Take-Two and some others, right, doing some of their promotions on Twitch. They were very public about saying that they viewed esports up to now really as a marketing platform for them versus a new line of business for them. So I think that is where their head is, and I think to the extent that they can start to realize the bigger opportunity with big channel partners and advertisers, that the door will open up a bit more. And the other thing we were talking about earlier is about cyber skills. So we've been, since we launched 3 months ago, we've been approached via the UK government and also companies, including PwC, about how do you get future talent. So how can you recruit? So there's a big shortage in the UK of people with cyber skills, anti-hacking, and what the only correlation that's been proven is, obviously, if you're a good gamer, you can solve things, you have fantastic cyber skills. So what they've come to us about, and thinking about how we can create either a league or events that they can kind of tap up either graduates or people who are gamers into their late 20s, who could be fantastic to be recruited. So again, depending, there's so many opportunities that I think people, the more we can educate about the benefit of esports or competitive video gaming, the better.
So there's something curious about the fact that the publishers have so much control and so much influence over these sports. I mean, an analogy springs to mind. It would be like if Wilson owned Wimbledon and controlled the entire game. Is that a limiting factor, that publishers have so much control, and is there any way around that?
I think the publishers have done a brilliant job, and I think it will be how they evolve. And obviously they're making revenue from doing what they're doing, and they're investing. To create a gaming title takes 2 years. It's million bigger than movies. It's massive investment. So in a way, they have to control that. I think it'll be interesting is the production companies. So ESL, who do a great job, and there's one in England called Gfinity as well. So there's a few production companies that work with these publishers, and I think it will how it evolves. Will they just want to focus on their one game, or will they branch out? And then will they be interested in grassroots? Will they be interested in helping with Dimension in the future? So I think certain publishers are focused on just that, and some publishers are for the greater good, and and that I think will evolve. And again, hopefully with pressure from government to say to these publishers. But I think they've done a brilliant job up to now, and it's just working with them. So. Okay.
We've talked a lot about Twitch, here and there in the course of this conversation. Twitch has obviously a massive presence in the esports world and in the online gaming world in general. But I wanted to press a little bit about the crossover between, if there is any, between the worlds of Let's Play gaming that are seen on YouTube and other platforms and esports. Is there a crossover? Are those completely different worlds? Are they reinforcing each other?
So Twitch, I think that Twitch versus some of the other channels, including YouTube that you mentioned, I think that they're actually more similar than they are different. If you look at some of the metrics around gaming on Twitch specifically, you see that 20 to 30% of the activity is gaming related, and there's a large bunch of activities that are non-gaming related. So the way that the platform has kind of built itself out looks and feels like a YouTube to a certain respect. I think that for Amazon, having a Twitch platform is a perfect fit with their strategy, obviously, around video, around AWS and other kinds of capabilities that they have. So I think that as it relates to gamers specifically, it's a great Trojan horse. I think that much like some of the other big players, the Facebooks of the world, there's a very good chance that Amazon will look to bolt on lots of different kinds of capabilities, whether it's video, whether it's mobile, whether it's highlights, those kinds of platforms that you see now bubbling up in little individual niche plays. I think that it's quite possible that that Twitch will start to build some of those capabilities out, and I would expect that they have a long happy life. As the leader there, it's also nice that they're able to look and learn from the 5 years of YouTube and this and that. So when they're going to market and figuring out how much to charge as a distributor, well, there's a basis for that already in the market.
Yeah, I mean, Twitch, without Twitch, we wouldn't be in the position we are in esports. They've done a fantastic job, and I think if you look below, you've got things like obviously YouTube gaming, and then you've got Azubu, and then you've got Jinx TV, which is a new channel which Sky, going to be a 24-hour Sky, and obviously ESPN have got that, but Twitch was kind of the catalyst, with social media on improving that. My only, from a personal point of view, is if they could be better on toxicity, on bad comments and sexism, which I think they're working on now, that would be great. But it's been fantastic. I mean, I think the content stats are ridiculous. It's like 55 million hours a day or something ridiculous. Right. I think.
It seems to be the only video platform that really is pulling in people for a very long period of time on a single piece of content. So it seems to be a different kind of a viewership model than has emerged yet in the online space.
So there's with Gfinity, which is a production company in the UK, they have a thing where they'll live stream a competition, but if you want to enhance that, you have to subscribe to Gfinity. So for example, if you're watching any competition, they'll just show the screen of the player, which the producer of the program thinks is the best view at the time. But in a team, you might have five players each side, and you might think, actually, I really want to follow Jeremy, he's my hero. You can't do that. So you can have enhancements where actually I just want to follow your screen and what you're doing and how you're playing the game. So it's a bit, I don't know if you follow Formula One, where you can choose your driver and the channel. So personalization will be enhanced. And at the moment, Twitch is quite flat, so there will be some changes in that. So it would be interesting if you end up having some niche followers like Azubu TV are kind of doing enhancements as well. But I think for the mainstream who aren't watching actual competitions, Twitch is fantastic.
I think that your question also raises another point, Jeremy, around kind of what the makeup of participation looks like. This is not a removed, interaction. You're not
Right.
looking at or participating in this content from afar, right? So we used to talk about, and we still do talk about, the super fan as separate from the creator, if you will. And I think what's super interesting about this space is that the fans are the creators. The individual that is, or the team that is creating the gaming experience. They're front and center. It's not LeBron James playing inside there. It is myself as an individual, my own icon, my own brand, and everything gets created. It's placed inside the experience and brings it to life. And I think that we're seeing that kind of integration between fan and creator across a lot of different media types. And this, I think that the gaming environment, esports in particular, is one that brings that to life.
So both Chester and I have kids who are 15 or 16, as we discovered.
I do too.
And you do too. So all three of us are kids right in this demographic. My son, for example, is incredibly into e-games and watching competitions, but he's not a competitor.
Yeah.
Do you find a strong crossover between those who participate and those who just spectate, or do you find that the worlds tend to be somewhat removed from one another?
This is armchair opinion.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, we're in armchairs.
We're in armchairs, so it works.
So the whole thing's armchair opinion.
Right. I think that it's about kids getting confidence in actually competing. So my sons are big gamers, Call of Duty guys, and they watch a lot now, and they're figuring out in what forums they can start to test their ability to compete in a more formal way. They do obviously tons of informal, mashups and this and that. But I think I fully expect. They're definitely interested in learning more about the competitions. For them, it's about kind of finding access to those, kind of the B League competitions before they start to really move along.
So just on classification, so my son's a Call of Duty player as well, and in the UK you have a PEGI rating, and so to purchase Call of Duty you have to be 18, but to play it at home you don't have to be 18, but to view it live in a theatre, an arena, you have to be 18. But when you play the single game versus a multiplayer game like a competition, it's actually not as violent as a normal game. So there's this debate about who should get involved and governance and stuff. And we have a trade association called Yuki who do a brilliant job as well, and they're trying to help between the trade and between the publisher, and the consumer. So there's a debate saying, well, look, if in a competition play, actually, it can be a PEGI rating of 14, then the people who actually really are playing at home is not a problem. So my son will only play Call of Duty. So he's literally not playing any other game. So it's quite interesting.
Right.
And I've tried to show him other games, but he's Call of Duty mainly because he's good at it. So and there's a moment of being a proud dad. So I said to my son, have you played with he just started a new school, and I said, have you played with your friends? And he said, 100 of us all went online and played a certain game, and it was last man standing. And I said, who won? And he said, well, I won. So rather than him winning, like a rugby match or a football match, he won this online game. And I was actually sort of surprised at how proud I was that he was the best gamer. And then I think his misspent youth and stuff.
I can be proud about that.
I can.
Well, so let's talk about that. We were all parents, these games in particular, the ones that are in the competitions, have been really rocked for being violent and for possibly promoting violent behavior, for promoting a question of a gun culture, which is more of an issue in the United States than it is anywhere else, obviously. So the question emerges: are these bad for us? Are these bad for our kids?
Yeah, I'll answer first, and then Chester has maybe something to say as well. But I guess my take on it is that I have some concerns about it from a health and wellness standpoint versus it contributing directly to gun violence. So I was reading, I read something, a psychologist said something to the effect of, look, if you play 4 hours of Call of Duty, you're going to be a little ramped up, but you're not necessarily going to go out that minute and commit a violent act. So I think that there's certainly something about sitting in front of these very intense, visually, beyond stimulating. I mean, if you do it in front of a large flat screen, it's hot, it's immersive, it's everything. And your kids walk out of here like they just had a workout. I mean, they're literally flushed and ramped and all those kinds of things. So I think that there is, I think that there is something just physically and also mentally about that kind of intense interaction that can be a bit, I don't want to use the word addicting, but I can't think of another one right now.
Mentally arousing.
Right, mentally. So those are my concerns more than, my kids or others that I know becoming directly violent with guns. I don't see that connection, but certainly, a less direct aggression. I think that there is that kind of outcome.
So my
But
view,
you
wearing
might be smart about this.
so wearing my parent hat,
Yes.
I've obviously live and breathe esports, and the classic thing is there's certain games like StarCraft which is better than playing chess, and there's a guy who's a grandmaster chess from Russia who has made his son play StarCraft, not chess, because he says it's better for you. And I was saying to Jeremy, you'll never get a parent saying you're playing too much chess to a child.
Right.
So if certain games are as good for your mind, it's good on leadership skills, because especially multiplayer games where you're talking to your friends about strategy, it's good for social skills. Obviously in moderation. So my son, he plays rugby, he plays tennis, he plays golf, and he games. He doesn't watch TV. So his spare time is that. He, on one level he's good at it, so I'm slightly encouraging that, but it's in moderation. The thing about does it enact violence? My personal view, there's a fantastic book that Jeremy and I have talked about called Reality is Broken, and there was a study done on your emotional spectrum, and depression is the worst, and gaming is the best. And gaming could be physical sports or traditional sports like tennis or golf, and it's gaming. So you get this ultimate, you're escaping from reality, but you're feeling buzzed, or whatever the right word.
Yeah.
If you've got tendencies of being very violent, it doesn't, you're violent anyway. And just talking about gun crime, so in the UK, they changed the law about handguns. So we could all have handguns up to about 20 years ago, and then the law changed. So we can have, if you're a farmer or you go shooting, you can have a rifle or a shotgun, and they got rid of handguns, right? So the police know anyone with a handgun is a violent person, so they immediately get that. And the whole debate about the guns, should they take all the guns away, is if you have that tendency, you could kill someone with a hammer or with a baseball bat. It's not the gun is the issue. So there's no proof, to my knowledge, that playing these games creates a violent character.
Yeah, great.
So these kids that we have are playing these in formative years. Those of us who played sports as youth, we're weekend warriors still frequently in those sports. You're still playing tennis. I don't know if you play any sports. I'm still out there playing squash really badly. So do the children of this generation have a future to look forward to in which their weekend warrior days will be spent gaming? Will the CEO of the future also have been playing one of these games? It's a two-part question.
Yeah, I mean, the CEO aside, I think that I think it's highly possible that we're going to see, individuals as they get older kind of look to chances to game again.